Now, during the Great Depression, when millions of men were unemployed, public opinion was hostile to the hiring of women. And when we look at white Anglo-Saxon Protestant values, or the values of a conservative past in any nation, women face the traditional concept of home, husband, children, and beauty regardless of children produced. Now, what happened to the plight of women during the Great Depression? They were given less pay than men. They were the last hired and first fired. Many were forced to resign in civil service jobs due to pressure from authorities that insisted that married women ought not to work so as to allow unemployed males a chance to fulfill the American dream. Now, labor unions in the 30s did make a commitment to organize them, yet labor preferred that they be union maids, not union members. The Social Security Act reached out to them in the form of aid to families with dependent children. So in the 1930s, women were asked to go home. But just when men were going off to war, industry had to recruit millions of workers to supply the rapidly expanding need for military equipment. Minorities, immigrants, and immigrant women were asked to fill the void. Now, well over 6 million women are going to enter the labor force during the war years. 2 million took clerical jobs, while 2.5 million worked in manufacturing. Now, 75% of the new women workers were married, and 3.7 million were not only married, but mothers. So before the war, the average woman wage earner was young, single, and self-supporting. But by 1945, more working women were married than single, and more were over 35 than under. Now, of course, in a male-centered imaginative society, women are not suited for industrial jobs. Now, can you imagine if women were allowed to work in factories? This is, of course, with regards to the national question. Never questioning the fact that women of color, minority women, black women, Asian women, Mexican women were constantly working in the fields. But nonetheless, for the first time, can you imagine white women dressed in jeans? Can you imagine women dressed in men's clothing? So for the men, they're being challenged. What's going on here? And plus, if the question is that if women worked in men's jobs, then of course their muscles will bulge and they'll become like men. And moreover, can you imagine women when they'd get their paychecks? Well, why they'd go to the nearest saloon on payday and they'd begin drinking and swearing just like the men. Get out of here. So during the war, women became riveters, lumberjills, as opposed to lumberjacks. They became riveters. This is where we get the term Rosie the Riveter. They were welders. They were crane operators, keel benders, tool makers, shell loaders, cowgirls, blast furnace cleaners, locomotive greasers, police officers, taxi drivers, and even football coaches. Women of all colors and class backgrounds abandoned menial jobs in dime stores and restaurants and laundries and hospitals for higher status, higher paying jobs. Public opinion had to quickly change from hostility to support for women's war work. Whereas during the 1930s, they were told to go home, when World War II broke out, women were asked to come back to work. So public opinion has to change from the hostility of women in the workplace to the support of women in the workplace. So posters and billboards began to urge women to do the job he left behind. Newspapers, magazines, radios, movies proclaimed Rosie the Riveter as a war hero. Now, the permanent shift in gender roles was merely a response to a national emergency.